Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Journey to Justice. If this is your first time watching my video, my story could be a little bit complex, so I'm asking you to go to YouTube and look up Students' Rights Advocator, or you can find me with the @ sign at Artersio1, and the name of my channel once again is Student Rights Advocator. So I'm doing two series. I recently did series one, part four. I'm now to part four, where I spoke about the retaliation that I encountered at the University of Miami from the professor of the course. I was dismissed 2 months before graduating. I can't go through the entire introduction. I was dismissed 2 months before graduating from an anesthesia program at and this appeared to have been a very strategic plan at the university to perpetuate this harm that they're doing to minority students in their courses. So in this part four of series one, I made several points that I feel that needs to be explained a little bit more. We know there's time constraints on TikTok. It's about 10 minutes or so. So I spoke about the age of the associate dean, Dr. Hushman, and that she's around the same age as the dean of the program, Dr. Monroe. I mentioned that they were in the mid to late 60s, and from a superficial Google search, I believe that's the case. So we know that in older people are a little bit more stubborn, and they're not so receptive to change. That's point one with regards to their age. Number two, we know that the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. So someone that is 68 years old was born in 1955. That's about 11 years before the Civil Rights Act passed. So in 1968, Dr. King died. That would give this person 13 years or so, 13 years old. We know that back in the civil rights struggle days with Dr. King and all these activists, that black people used to get hosed down on the streets. The police used to release police dogs on the protesters. All of that is well documented. We can also look online and find the signs. They're still on the internet: whites only, blacks only, from schools to restaurants to all sorts of public accommodations. There were signs in the Jim Crow eras to separate black from whites and stuff like that. So I said that with regards to their age, if you juxtapose this knowledge that these professors were in their teens when these things were happening around them to what they are doing today in their position at this private university in South Florida, the University of Miami, when you compare, the acts are basically the same. So the Civil Rights Act ended Jim Crow. So now it's no longer allowed to have a sign at the University of Miami or to say we don't accept blacks. Blacks are not welcome. These things were in apartments and everywhere, right? It's no longer acceptable for these professors to do that at the University of Miami, but now they still find a way to dismiss students from graduating. So they may allow you in by law because all these numbers are monitored, but comes to graduating, they can misinterpret the policy. In fact, it goes beyond misinterpreting policies, because you can't misinterpret non-discrimination policies, but they go straight into deceptive acts, interfering with the appeal process with the appeal committee, lying to the appeal committee, telling the appeal committee that they asked me to do more clinical hours and I agreed. Tell the committee that they did not ask me to resign. Like all these different points that they make, and all of that is technically a form of the same end result of the Jim Crow laws, the civil rights, prior to the civil rights, the Jim Crow laws. So whether I want you to come to your conclusion to know that someone who was 13, 14, 15 years old, seeing all these atrocities being committed on the black community, and for them to be doing what they're doing today, we can come to the conclusion that they condone that types of behavior back in their teens when they were watching these things, right? Now, the only issue is that they cannot, it's not socially acceptable for them to admit that this is their sentiment, that they hate black people and they're fundamentally racist, right? So the age is a key component. I didn't talk about their age to make fun of that, or my mother is in her 60s herself. But when to know what happened in the past and these individuals are still around, and then to see what they're doing now, it's a clear sign that they have not moved on from the 50s and 60s, and they still wish that for things to be the same, or they're doing whatever they can in their position of power to perpetuate this institutional racism, the harm that happened to black people back in the 60s, the late 50s and 60s. That's one point. Point number two, from that same video, once again, I encourage you to go and watch it on YouTube. It's about 40 minutes. Point number two, I spoke about that in addition to those two professors, the associate dean is white and the dean is white. And now you have Hispanics professors, like Dr. Gonzalez is Spanish, right? A Spanish guy. So back in Cuba, there was so much human rights violation with the communism and silencing people, no freedom to speak. The government just outright eliminating anybody who dissented, who had any form of disagreement with what they were doing. And then if you take that the Europe continent, right, where Dr. Vladanov is from, Bulgaria, southeastern European country, where there's no human right for women, there's no freedom of speech, all these oppressive regimes. That's where she's from. And then Dr. Prado and so on, and even up to the judge in the court, like Hispanic, first generation Hispanic judge. These people have their accents. Once again, that was not to make fun of where they're from. I'm an immigrant myself, first generation immigrant myself. But my point with that was to say there's nothing more painful than to be discriminated against another immigrant, right? Someone who left their country to come to America seeking better opportunities, and suddenly this person feel like they're in a position of superiority and that they can discriminate against another immigrant. That was my point with that. Point number three, let's talk about plagiarism. We know that all universities are fervently against plagiarism. You can't, cheat on your tests. You can't do any of that stuff. So why is the university allowing their professors to temper with students' grades, to be deceptive, to lie to appeal committee, to lie to the court, to lie to the attorneys, to lie and lie and lie, just to solidify a discriminatory act that they committed on me, right? So this is how this could be very dangerous when one person abdicate their leadership duties and allow to things to get further worse than they were at the beginning, and it's just downhill from there. So plagiarism, while they want to hold their students to standards of you can't plagiarize, I would challenge the university to hold their professors and deans and even the president to the same standard. That once you engage in propaganda and lying and a character assassination, you are just as worse as one act of cheating on one question. That's just even worse if it's at the institutional level. Number four, right? The last point I want to make here is to speak about courage. it is very important for us to have courage. Dr. King did not win the civil rights movement from his basement. Rosa Parks got arrested because she wouldn't give up her seat on a bus to a white person. Malcolm X arrested multiple times. Dr. King eventually got shot. And John Lewis, one of the most recent very strong activists for Black people, was arrested multiple times. I feel like I've reached this point now where this is where I have to take my fight to the to the streets. I have to put everything on the line. What I mean by that is whether you protest lawfully or not, some police officers may still find they may still justify arresting you. Like even if you're on a public sidewalk, they may still ask you to leave, and if you refuse, which you do have the right to refuse to leave because you're on a public sidewalk, you are protected by your First Amendment. They may still arrest you, and if you resist arrest, then now you have broken the law, right? So this is what I mean. Courage is important. There's no courage at the University of Miami and their leadership team. But as students, if you are discriminated against, you have to muster the courage to allow these racist professors perpetuating institutional racism to get away with their harm. Doesn't do you any good, and it doesn't do society any good. I have reached a point now where I am ready to accept the consequences, where when there should be no consequences, as I speak about my First Amendment right. So having said that, yeah, I wanted to just flush out these points about their age, and that the fact that they're Hispanic. This is not a criticism of Hispanics around the country, but it's more the point to say that it's painful to be discriminated by another immigrant. And we know that discrimination could be very complicated. Hispanics can hate other Hispanics, like the Puerto Ricans versus the Cubans, or vice versa. And also the age, to see that from their life experiences. Dr. Hushman came from Albany. I recently was looking online and I saw that Albany was one of the most racist cities in New York, and that even as late as the 2000s, that people were complaining of the treatment that blacks were receiving in Albany, New York. And Dr. Hushman, on her resume published on the university website, came from Albany, New York, not Georgia. But I thought she came from Georgia in a previous video I did, but it's New York. She came from New York, and New York is a very Albany, New York is one of the most racist cities in the U.S. So when you connect all those points together with regards to this one associate professor, the age and the time that she grew around up in and saw all the atrocities against blacks, and age come with them being stubborn, that's also unwilling to change their ways. Not once again, not name calling or being disrespectful, but it is what it is. Older people are a little bit more stubborn. And then if you add power to that and any dislike of black people, there's no doubt in my mind that this is what is continuing, and her decisions at the University of Miami, and not allowing the normal processes to go forward. In my case, constantly interfering and lying to courts and lying to appeal committee, and just to maintain this narrative that they're doing the right thing. So having said that, I sincerely appreciate your attention. Go on YouTube, look me up. Well then, thank you for watching.